Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Mentors Conference, pre-conference day 5, as we say, as the test day, because here we'll look at our what to do in TOEFL, what to do in GRE, and that's what we call as the test day. And here we are live, and we have a wonderful mentor with us, Mr. Sachin Pulil. Now, Mr. Sachin is like a digital admissions coach, has got a GRE score of perfect 360 out of 360 and got admitted into Pennsylvania University. And it's a pleasure for us to have him here for this conference to guide you guys about it. All the people in the stream, please like the stream, because as soon as you like the stream, it reaches out to more people. We got to cater the algorithm, and as it reaches out to more people, we want more students to take value out of this, where people who need guidance for GRE, they could get guidance from this. So please share the stream, like the stream, share with your friends. It's totally free. Just go for the YouTube stream. We have Sachin sir here. Uh, Now, it's an honor to have him here. Someone who has a perfect score of 360 out of 360 in GRE. Again, I'm repeating this again and again because I want you guys to know that you can get full value out of this life, and you can put all the good questions over the chat, and we'll be happy to take them up after the session. Sir, the stage is all yours, and we can go forward with the presentation.
Perfect. All right. So then let me just go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah.
Just a sec. Okay. All right. Can you guys see my screen? And if you can hear me as well. Saswat, can you just confirm? It's working, right?
Yeah, it's working. It's working. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. So yes, welcome to the Answers and the Details GRE workshop. Like you said, my name is Sachin Pulil, and I'm a digital admissions coach. So in 2019, I scored a perfect 340 on the GRE, and now I help people prepare for the GRE exam and help them apply to college and all that. Right. So normally, I do a bunch of GRE webinars where I teach a bunch of GRE preparation strategies and all that. But since foreign admits decided to call this the Answers and the Details kind of workshop, so I thought about it and I was like, I don't want to just do like a regular strategy session as I always do, but what I want to do is I actually want to do some actual questions where you guys can sort of see how exactly the answer will be in the details, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go tackle the biggest, I guess, obstacle for students out there when it comes to the GRE exam, which is reading comprehension. Okay, so in this session, what we're going to do is we're going to go tackle reading comprehension, right? And we are going to go with 3 reading GRE RC passages, and we're going to answer 8 questions. So I think 3 questions for the first one, 3 questions for the second one, 2 questions for the last. And how it's going to work is I'm going to be doing the questions with you guys. You guys are going to be doing the questions with me. We're going to take a couple of minutes, read the passage and then try to figure out the answer. We're going to lock on an answer. We'll try to see if it's right. And then I'll try to explain to you, what my logic is to get that answer. And then you guys can sort of see, how I actually solve reading comprehension questions, right? So this will be like a very, very hands-on session. So you guys can obviously, try to solve the questions with me, right? So I want you guys to, participate. It's not just something that you're just going to be listening and taking notes. You are going to be trying to answer the questions yourself and try to see, where your logic went right or wrong and all that. Right. Now, one thing I want to tell you guys is all the passages that I've taken here are from the Manhattan 5-pound book of GRE practice problems. It's a great textbook. I used it for my preparation. Has a ton of questions. So yeah, if you guys want to go pick that up, absolutely you can. And in this presentation, the answer will be in the details, but not always. Right. It can also be a general idea. Right. So if you guys are ready, type ready in the chat, and we can get started with answering the questions. All right. Okay, so let's begin. So what I'm going to do is here is a passage, right? So what we're going to do is I want you guys to take a screenshot of whatever you're seeing on the screen right now, and then I want you to save it in Paint. Okay, the reason why is because when we actually go to the question side of things, sometimes you'll need to refer back to the passage in order to find the answer. So that's why I want you guys to take a screenshot of whatever you're seeing on the screen right now, and then save it in Paint. And when we actually try to solve the question, I want you to go back and read the passage if necessary to answer the question. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys, I would say, 1.5 minutes to read this passage because it's not a very big passage. So you guys have 1.5 minutes to read the passage. Go ahead. Maybe I'll just stop my cam here for a second so that you guys can focus. All right, 45 seconds left. Okay, and that is time. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go through some questions based on the passage. Hopefully you guys took a screenshot of the passage already. If not, again, just take a screenshot right now, save it in Paint, because now you're not going to see this passage again. Okay, so you have to go to your screenshot to be able to see it again. All right, let's get started with the first question. Question number 1. The primary purpose of the passage is to A, give the history of supernova, B, describe a shift in thought as a result of a natural event, C, juxtapose two opposing views about supernova, D, corroborate the view that the Earth is not central to the universe, and E, explain how science and philosophy interrelate. Okay, again, I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to try to figure out the answer, and let me know what you guys think the answer is. Okay. All right. Okay, so I think hopefully you guys know you have your answer ready. Maybe you've written it down and stuff. So now what we're going to do is we're going to analyze the question and try to figure out, how we can find the answer. Right. So the question is, what is the primary purpose of the passage? Now, this is a very common GRE RC question. You'll see it a lot, and you'll need to be prepared, to face this passage, right? So to face this type of question, right? So now what I want you guys to do, I want you to all tab to go into that Paint, and I want you to be looking at the article with me, because I'm also going to be looking at the article, but the video will be, focused on the question, right? So now let's look at the article together. A supernova is a brief stellar explosion so luminous that it can briefly outshine an entire galaxy. While the explosion itself takes less than 15 seconds, the supernova takes weeks or months to fade from view. During that time, a supernova can emit an amount of energy equivalent to the amount of energy the sun is expected to radiate over its entire lifespan. Supernova can generate enough heat to create heavy elements such as mercury, gold, and silver. Although supernova explode frequently, few of them are visible from Earth to the naked eye. In 1604 in Padua, Italy, a supernova became visible, appearing as a star so bright that it was visible in daylight for more than a year. Galileo, who lectured at the university, gave several lectures attended by the public. The lectures not only sought to explain the origin of the star, some posited that was perhaps merely vapor near the Earth, but seriously undermined the views of many philosophers that the heavens were unchangeable. This idea was foundational to a worldview underpinned by central and all-important Earth, with celestial bodies merely rotating around it. Okay, so now what I want you guys to do is, what I want you guys to know is, when there is a passage where there are, of course, multiple paragraphs, right? Most passages are going to have multiple paragraphs, but in the specific case where there is a passage with 2 paragraphs, okay? There's a phenomenon, or not a phenomenon, there's a pattern called the twist, okay? The twist is where a passage with 2 paragraphs will have an introductory paragraph, and then it will have a second paragraph, right? The introductory paragraph is always going to be the background information, and the secondary paragraph, that second paragraph, is going to be where the crux of the information, the primary purpose of the passage, will be found, right? This is called the twist, when you have an introduction that's kind of generic, basic stuff that's telling you, what's going on, and then the second passage gets into a little bit more detail, or explores a certain topic and all that, right? So here again we have a twist. So what the twist is, in the first passage, right, they've given us what is a supernova, and this is basically some information about supernova and all that, just so if you don't know about supernova, you can learn more about it. And then the second passage, they focus on Galileo, right? What he did, how it impacted the people and all that, right? So when you're looking for the primary purpose of this passage, you're going to be looking at the second paragraph, not the first. The first is just the background setting, and the second one is where that concrete information is going to be. So to solve this question, which is the primary purpose of the passage, is you want to try to primarily look at the second passage, right? Sorry, second paragraph, right? So if we go back to our article here, right, we see that the second paragraph is all about Galileo, who, in Padua, there was a supernova that exploded for a long time. Galileo gave a bunch of lectures that people attended, and the lectures tried to explain the origin of the star, and it really, undermined the views of philosophers out there. And it was an important lecture that undermined the views of all these philosophers and all these guys, right? So that's the more focused part, right? The supernova is not the focus. The focus is Galileo, what he did and how it impacted the world. So that's where the primary primary purpose of the passage is going to be found. So to answer the question, the primary purpose of the passage is to A, give the history of supernova. A is wrong because you are not talking about supernova in general, right? You are giving some basic information about supernova here and there, but you're not talking about, oh, okay, this is where supernova were first discovered. These are all the supernovas that happened. This is how frequently it happens. This is when we discovered this and that. That's not the purpose of the passage, right? The whole thing that, Galileo is there, that just sort of rebukes the fact that, it's not about the history of supernova. So A is a wrong answer, right? B, describe a shift in thought as a result of a natural event. So now B here is going to be our answer, right? And the reason why is, again, because of that twist, right? So first paragraph is just, okay, this is what a supernova is, guys, just in case you didn't know. Second paragraph, okay, so there was a supernova a long time ago. Galileo did this, and he tried to explain the origins, and it completely messed up people's views back then, right? So what you're doing is, because of a natural event, which is of course a supernova, there was a shift in thought. People started thinking, okay, maybe the Earth is not the center of the place, might be some other place else and stuff. It just describes a slight shift in thought, right? That's the whole purpose of the passage, right? So that's why B is the right answer. C is the wrong answer here because of the juxtaposed two opposing views about supernova. If you check out the details of this passage, again, answers and details, right? So if you check out the details of this passage, there are no two opposing views about supernova, right? The opposing views that are introduced by the passage, is all about, the Earth being, central versus the Earth being non-central, celestial bodies. It's just a normal body that's rotating around other celestial bodies. So those are the two opposing views, but then neither of these opposing views have anything to do with supernova in general. That is why C is the wrong answer. D, corroborate the view that Earth is not central to the universe. Now, what is corroborate? Corroborate is when you give an example to try to justify something, right? For example, if you tell your parents that, you were out maybe like having like lunch at a particular restaurant, right? And then your parents are like, hey, you know what? I don't believe you. So then you would corroborate your story by showing pictures of you at the restaurant, maybe showing your bill and all that, right? So to corroborate means to show examples, show proof of like a particular idea or story and all that. Now, in this passage, the purpose of the passage is not to prove that Earth is not central to the universe. It's just to recount, something that happened in history once, right? So it's not to prove anything. That's why D is the wrong answer. E, explain how science and philosophy can interrelate. Now, this is it's a really wide answer option, right? It's really broad. It's not really specific to either Galileo, supernova, nothing like that. Right? It's very, very broad. And they haven't even talked about all the other elements of science, right? They haven't, talked about like biology. They've only talked about, like astronomy and all these celestial bodies and all that. They haven't talked about all the other types of science out there. And they haven't talked about, all the other types of philosophies out there and how these guys can interrelate. Since this is like a very specific instance, so then this E, which is, an answer that's too broad, cannot be your answer, okay? So in this question, the answer is going to be B, all right? Did you guys get that right? All right, what were you thinking? What were your answers? Again, let me know in the chat. Okay, so let's move on to second question, which is, which of the following can be inferred by the passage? Consider each of the answer choices separately and then indicate all that can apply, right? A, supernova can take over a year to fade from view. B, prior to 1604, no one had seen a supernova. And C, Galileo convinced philosophers of the incorrectness of their views, right? Again, I want you guys to take a minute to go back to your questions and, go back to the passage, try to see what you think might be the answer here, and then I will come back to you in just a minute. All right, so 30 seconds are up. All right, and that is time. Okay, so now let's look at the answers. What is the answer for this particular question? All right. So which of the following can be inferred by the passage? Consider each of the answer choices separately and indicate all that can apply. A, supernova can take over a year to fade from view. So now, is there any element in the passage that tells us, the time that a supernova can take to fade from view? Let's go and check it out. So we see that, again, go back to, the paint file where you've saved the passage, right? So let's see here. In line, it seems to be line 3, it says supernova can take, line 2 and line 3, supernova can take weeks or months to fade from view. All right, that's interesting. And then somewhere else also it said that, it was visible for more than a year, right? So I think in line, what is this, 7 or 8? It says appearing as a star so bright that it was visible in daylight for more than a year. So it seems to me that, supernova can take a couple of weeks to a couple of months to more than a year to, to fade away from view, right? So supernova can take over a year to fade from view. Yes, it can take over a year to fade from view, because it already did, in this particular instance, take over a year to fade from view. So A, it would be one of our correct answers. Again, it says indicate all that apply, right? So you to multiply, you to take, more than one if you find that more than one could fit the options, right? B, prior to 1604, no one had ever seen a supernova. So is there anything in the passage that says, no one before 1604 had seen a supernova, or this is the first time in 1604 that, people had seen a supernova? I don't think so, right? Nowhere in the passage does it say this is the first time. It says that, this is like a big phenomenon that happened and it was there for more than a year, but it doesn't say this was the first time that a supernova was seen, because it could have been seen like, many times earlier, right? Because again, it doesn't say anything about, the first time being there. So B would not be our right answer. C, Galileo convinced philosophers of the incorrectness of their views. So does it say how philosophers were convinced? Let's go and check it out. So we see that the philosophers are brought in where? At line 11, but seriously undermined the views of many philosophers that heavens were unchangeable. This idea was foundational. All-important earth, the celestial bodies merely treading on it. So it seems to tell us that, it seems to have, or the lecture undermined the views of many philosophers, but then it doesn't say that Galileo was able to convince them of their incorrectness, right? So we can't really, it doesn't say, philosophers now began to think, okay, maybe their views are wrong, or maybe, this is not a good idea. It didn't say anything like that. So it just says that, this lecture could potentially undermine the whole Earth being the celestial, Earth being the central focus and all that. So again, C, I'm not convinced that C could be the right answer, because there's just not enough evidence in the passage to state that, Galileo, yes, definitely convinced philosophers. So out of all the answer options, only A is where we can directly say from the passage, yes, it can take over a year to fade from view, because in this scenario, it did take over a year to fade from view. Okay, let's get to the next question. The author mentions which of the following as a result of the supernova of 1604? A, the supernova created and dispersed the heavy elements out of which the Earth and everything on it is made. B, Galileo explained the origin of the supernova. C, the public was interested in hearing lectures about the phenomenon. D, Galileo's lectures were opposed by philosophers. And E, those who thought the supernova was vapor were proved wrong. Okay, so again, take a minute to try to see what you think the answer could be, and then we'll discuss. Ten seconds. Okay, so that is time. Now let's look at the answers, right? So the answer for this, the answer for this question is C, right? Now, how many of you got that right? So this is actually a pretty tough question, right? So because the way that you find the answer for this question is like it's very, very minute, right? So first A, the supernova created and dispersed the heavy elements out of which the Earth and everything on it is made. So I think they do mention some elements in the passage, right? Let's go and check that out. Supernova generate enough heat to create heavy elements such as mercury, gold, and silver. But it doesn't say that it doesn't say that these materials actually make up the Earth, because there's a lot more other stuff that makes up the Earth as well, right? So it doesn't say that supernova create all the elements from which you can make up like the Earth or something like that. So that's just, you just can't infer it, right? So that doesn't seem like the right answer. B, Galileo explained the origin of the supernova. So if I go to, let's say, line 9, it says, Galileo, sorry, line 8 and 9. So Galileo, who lectured at the university, gave several lectures widely attended by the public. The lectures not only sought to explain the origin of the star, some posited perhaps it was merely vapor near the Earth, but seriously undermined the views of so on, right? So he tried to, explain the origin of the star. So that's what he seems to have done. So maybe B could be our right answer. Right? Let's move on to number C. C, the public was interested in hearing lectures about the phenomenon. Does it say anywhere that the public were interested or like they showed interest? Okay, so line 9, it says, that he gave several lectures widely attended by the public. So people, attend a lot, then they're probably going to be interested, in what Galileo has to say. So C also seems to be, that seems to be, it's one of the right answers, maybe I'm thinking. Next, let's go to D. Galileo's lectures were opposed by philosophers. Does it say anywhere that, philosophers said that this is a bad idea, they're not supposed to lecture, like he received a lot of hate for it? I don't think so. It just said that he undermined the views of many philosophers, but it didn't say that philosophers protested or anything like that. So I don't think D is going to be our right answer. E, those who thought the supernova was a vapor were proved wrong. Does it say anywhere that these guys were proved wrong? It says that some posited. Posited means to like sort of think about, try to explain something. That's what that means. Perhaps it was merely vapor near the Earth. So people just thought about it, but doesn't say that Galileo said to prove them wrong and something. He was like, he basically gave all the right answers, right? So in this case, I'm thinking that B or C could be the right answer. So if I was to solve this question, I'd be like, okay, torn between, okay, B or C, what do I select here? Okay. So now the thing is, B is actually the wrong answer here because of a very, very small piece of the puzzle, because of a very small piece of the paragraph, right? Which is the lectures not only sought to explain the origins of the star. That means the lectures, they tried to explain the origin of the star, but then you never actually know whether they succeeded to explain the origin of the star. We don't actually know whether Galileo got it right? We don't actually know whether he understood, fully what exactly is a supernova and how all these things happened. He tried his best, or he sought to explain the star, but we don't actually know whether he actually did it correctly, whether people believed him and all that, right? So that is why B would not be the right answer. But C, again, public was interested in hearing lectures about the phenomenon. Yes, because it was widely attended by the public, and if something receives a wide attention, then that means people are interested in what's going on there, right? That's how we know, even from our time now, we know that that's going to be true. That is why our answer here is going to be C. Okay. So that is the first passage. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the session. Hopefully you guys are learning some stuff and getting some RC practice as well. Trying to see, how we can find the answer, trying to prove answer options wrong, and trying to see if there's any specific evidence in the passage that can prove an answer option right, and all that. Okay, so the first passage, I decided to pick something science related because most of us are going to be a little bit comfortable reading stuff that is science related. So in the second passage, we're going to go with something that is not science related at all, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult. All right, so let's go. Here's passage number 2. I know it's a little bit blurry, but hopefully you guys can still see. Again, I want you guys to take a screenshot, save it in Paint. You can overwrite the previous Paint file, perfectly fine. And then we're going to be looking at this passage multiple times when we solve the question. All right. So again, I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes or maybe a minute and a half to read. I'm going to give you guys a minute and a half to read because this is a smaller passage. All right, so that should be a minute and a half there. Okay, so now let's get to the questions. Okay, so again, take a screenshot because we are going to be moving on to the questions. All right, so let's get started. All right, question number 1. The primary purpose of the passage is to A, relate the story of a somewhat likable antihero. B, discuss how the work of art was met by diverging responses. C, give a history of the work of Mozart. D, make a case for the renown of Don Giovanni. E, emphasize the moral aspects of a musical work. So now let's go back to the passage and try to read it. Okay, let's read together. By 1784, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was internationally renowned as a composer of The Marriage of Figaro, and consequently received a commission from the Prague Opera House to compose another opera. The resulting product was Don Giovanni, which tells the tale of a criminal and seducer who nevertheless invokes sympathy from audiences and whose behavior fluctuates from moral crisis to hilarious escapade. While Don Giovanni is widely considered Mozart's greatest achievement, 18th century audiences in Vienna, Mozart's own city, were ambivalent at best. The opera mixed traditions of moralism with those of a comedy, a practice heretofore unknown among the composer's works, resulting in a production that was not well liked by conservative Viennese audiences. Meanwhile, however, Don Giovanni was performed to much acclaim throughout Europe. Okay, so that is a passage we have here. And again, you guys, this is a two paragraph passage. So you're going to have the twist here, right? So the first part is going to be, by the way, there was a guy named Mozart. He made this awesome thing called the Don Giovanni. And that's the scenario, right? And then the second paragraph is going to be where the purpose is going to be found, right? So first paragraph is, okay, here's Mozart. He made Don Giovanni. That's essentially what the first paragraph does, right? And the second paragraph, it says, Don Giovanni is supposed to be considered his greatest achievement, and people around Europe all loved it. But the people in Vienna didn't really like it much, because it mixed moralism and comedy, and that was something that was a little bit rare, in Mozart's work. And it wasn't really well liked by the Viennese audiences, who tend to be a little bit more conservative, like they were conservative people, right? So the primary purpose of the passage is to A, relate the story of a somewhat likable anti-hero. So it seems to me that, the story of a somewhat likable anti-hero. So then for that to be the primary purpose of the passage, then the passage needs to be all about Don Giovanni. But it's not. It's really all about Mozart, right? So A is definitely not the right answer. B, discuss how the work of art was met by diverging responses. So this could be the right answer because, again, they've said that the audience was ambivalent, right? As in some of them liked it, some of them did not so like it, and so on. So, or they kind of liked it, half and half, right? So that seems to be what they're focusing on. Plus, they're talking about how the Viennese audience didn't really like it as much, but then the European audience, really loved it and all that. And the world really loves it. And they say it's one of Mozart's best works. So then diverging responses, B could be one of our right answers. C, give a history of the work of Mozart. So they haven't talked about literally anything else besides Don Giovanni and the Marriage of Figaro. No other work by Mozart. So I'm pretty sure Mozart made a lot more than just two things. So I don't think C would be the right answer. The C is way too broad. D, make a case for the renown of Don Giovanni. So I would say that this paragraph or this passage is more about making a case, or more like explaining why the Viennese didn't like it, rather than say why Don Giovanni was amazing, right? So nowhere in the passage does it say Don Giovanni was amazing because of these reasons. It just says Don Giovanni was this. Some people found it amazing, others not so much. So I'm not going to say D is the right answer here. E, emphasize the moral aspects of a musical work. So again, they haven't really talked about the moral aspects of Don Giovanni. It's just been about how the Viennese audience related to it, right? So it seems to me that B is going to be the best answer that I have. So I'm going to be selecting B, which is our right answer here. All right. Next question. The author mentions the mixing of traditions of moralism with those of comedy, line 8, primarily in order to A, explain a work's lackluster reception among a particular group of people. B, remind the reader of the plot of Don Giovanni. C, highlight a practice common in contemporary opera. D, argue for an innovative approach to opera. E, undermine with an E. Undermine a previously presented assertion. So again, I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to try to solve this yourselves while I wait for you to try to see, what the answer could be. Okay, so you guys have 1 minute. Go ahead. All right, so that should be around a minute for you guys. Let me see how many of you guys got the answer. Okay, so let's go to the answers, right? All right, so the A is explain a work's lackluster reception among a particular group of people. So lackluster reception, okay, first let's go to the actual part of the passage where they explain this, right? Traditional moralism with those of comedy. So why have they mentioned the mixing part here? So if you go back to the paragraph, in line 8 is where this happens, right? So line 7 goes, the opera mixed traditions of moralism with those of comedy, a practice heretofore unknown among the composer's works, resulting in a production that was not well liked by the conservative Viennese audiences, right? So why exactly did the writer say this? An opera mixed traditions of moralism with those of comedy. Okay, so A, he did it to explain a work's lackluster reception among a particular group of people. Now, this could be right, because it said that, that the opera mixed these two things that resulted in a production that was not well liked. So it was probably the mixing that was not well liked by these conservative Viennese audiences. So A could be our potential right answer here. Let's keep going. B, remind the reader of the plot of Don Giovanni. So it doesn't really talk about the plot. They just said that, if they were to talk about the plot, they would actually talk about what exactly happens in Don Giovanni. Nowhere here have they actually said, okay, like this is actually what happens in Don Giovanni. It just says the tale of a criminal and seducer. We don't actually know what the actual plot of Don Giovanni is. So I'm going to go with B as the wrong answer. C, highlight a practice common in a contemporary era. So it doesn't say that it's common at all in that contemporary era. It said that Mozart hadn't done it before, right? But it doesn't say that, if other people were doing it. So I don't think that D, C would be the right answer here. D, argue for an innovative approach to opera. So it doesn't seem like the author is arguing for anything. It doesn't say that, author is saying that we should have an opera with more mixed traditions and all that. So I don't think it's an argument. So I'm not going to pick D. And E, undermine a previously presented assertion. So you're undermining it, right? So where is the assertion? Where's the previously presented assertion? So it doesn't seem to me that this sentence actually weakens any previously presented assertion. So undermine means to weaken. Assertion means like a position or like a conclusion that the author has come up with, right? So it doesn't seem to me that it's undermining anything. So I can't really think of anything that's undermining. So I'm not going to pick E, right? So then our answer is probably going to be A, right? A is the only one that seems to make sense, right? So the author said, that he combined moralism and comedy, and that's what led to the lackluster reception, right? Let's move on to question number 3. It can be inferred from the passage that which of the following is true about the response of Viennese audiences? Response of Viennese audiences to Don Giovanni. The audiences preferred purely moralistic works. The response, I don't know why I put response twice. The response was unequivocally positive. C, they did not know the composer was attempting to mix musical styles. D, the play's moral themes were offensive to Viennese audiences. E, they preferred operas that followed existing stylistic. They preferred. It should be they preferred. There's a lot of mistakes here. Let me just see if I can fix this. Pen. They preferred. Yeah, there we go. They preferred operas that were that followed existing stylistic conventions. Okay, again, I'm going to give you guys, I think 45 seconds now because you already had some time to go through it. So I'm going to give you guys 45 seconds to try to see if you can find the right answer. Okay, so that's about 45 seconds. So hopefully you guys have the answer for me. All right, let's get to going through the answer options. So A, the audiences preferred, so wait, first of all, it can be inferred from the passage that which of the following is true about the response of Viennese audiences to Don Giovanni? A, the audiences preferred purely moralistic works. Does it say anywhere that they preferred only moralistic works? I don't think so. It just says that the opera mixed moralism with comedy, and that's why they did not like it. But does it say that the Viennese audiences preferred moralism? Because they could also prefer comedy, right? You don't actually know. It doesn't say that they preferred one over the other. So I'm not gonna pick A. I don't think there's any logic there. B, the response was unequivocally positive. So now B, without even checking the answer, I know that this is going to be a wrong answer, right? Without even checking the passage, I know this is going to be a wrong answer because it's too absolute, right? So in the GRE, whenever there's any answer option that's too absolute, they're saying that, it's unequivocally positive, it tends to be the wrong answer. right? So that's why I'm just going to go with B. I just read the answer option immediately. I know it's the wrong answer. I'm going to go on to C. See, they did not know that the composer was attempting to mix musical styles. Does it say anywhere that they did not know? Doesn't seem to say so. Doesn't seem to say that they do not know that. Okay, so I'm not going to pick C. D, the play's moral themes were offensive to Viennese audiences. Does it say that they were offended? No, it just says that they didn't like it. So even if you don't like something, it doesn't mean that you have to be offended by it, right? So I don't think so. That pretty much leaves us with E by elimination, but let's see E. E, they preferred operas that followed existing stylistic conventions. So the author has said that the opera mixed A and B, it mixed some stuff together, and that's why it was not, and it resulted in a production that was not well liked by conservative Vietnamese audiences. So conservative Vietnamese audiences, they probably like tradition, they like the way things are. That's what the whole conservatism means, right? To have things the way they are, right? So Viennese audiences, they seem to like more conservative stuff, existing stuff. So they didn't see, I don't think they liked, so they preferred, operas that followed existing stylistic conventions, which is why here our answer is going to be E. Okay, so we have one more passage to go through, and so let's go with that. All right. Again, I want you guys to take some time to read it. Again, take a screenshot, save it in Paint, because we're going to be doing 2 questions on this. This one's a little bit bigger, and it's more about literature, right? So it's going to be a little bit more complex for you guys to understand. So again, I'm going to give you guys, say, 2 minutes. I think it's a little bit bigger passage. 2 minutes to read it, and then we will start answering questions. Okay, so I think that should be enough time. Hopefully you guys have been able to read the passage. So now let's get to answering it, all right? So let me just open the passage up for me as well, somewhere else. There we go. All right, so now let's get to the first question, which is the author of the passage would be most likely to agree with which of the following statements. A, short story collections that depend on the reader to find the common thread that ties stories together. B, Isabelle Allende uses the same setting for a majority of her fiction. C, it is possible to create a coherent story collection if the stories take place in vastly different times and places. D, intuition is a more important aspect of Sandra Cicero's writing than the characters of the setting. E, the best short story collections feature some through line reader that the reader can follow and that connects to various stories. Okay, interesting. So let's go read the passage and we'll try to figure it out. Okay, so passage goes like this. A single short story can suggest a desired response from the reader. It is a difficult task, though, to create a world within a single short story and then repeat this again in another short story while maintaining a consistent flow of ideas. Many authors prefer to use the same setting, indeed, often the same characters in each story. Isabel Alon's Diez Cuentos de Iva Luna comes to mind. In these stories, Allende uses the small town of Agua Santa as a setting for the entire collection. Woman Hollowing Creek is a collection of short stories by Sandra Cisneros. Rather than using the same characters or setting throughout the collection, Cisneros takes a different approach to relating her stories to one another. Much of the burden, in fact, is placed on the reader, for the characters change each time, as does the setting. Furthermore, while the characters are largely Mexican-American immigrant women, each character presents a distinct style and literary voice. What these works have in common is more intuitive. Mood, circumstance, time, tone, and imagery all play a role in creating the world in which the stories take place. Okay, so they seem to be contrasting, these two people, Eva de Luna, how she uses the same setting of Agua Santa and maybe the same characters. I don't know, they haven't mentioned that. But Sandra Cicerno, she does something entirely different. She completely changes things up. And then whatever connects her short stories are more intuitive stuff like mood and circumstance and time and all that, right? So that seems to be the main purpose of the passage here. So the question asks, the author of the passage would be most likely to agree with which of the following statements, all right? So A, short story collections depend on the reader to find a common thread that ties the stories together. So not always, right? Because it's possible for short stories to just have the same setting. That's what they're saying in the first paragraph, right? So many authors prefer to use the same setting and stuff, right? So that way you can just sort of connect all the stories together. B, Isabelle Allende uses the same setting for the majority of her fiction. So they talk about Isabelle Allende, right? And they're talking about her short stories, right? So many authors use the same setting and all that, but didn't say like all of her fiction. So that's kind of a little bit generic. So I'm not really sure about B. I don't really know about B, right? C, it is possible to create a coherent short story collection if the stories take place in vastly different times and places. Yes, so that seems like a solid answer because that's the whole purpose of the second paragraph, right? Second paragraph is talking about how this other writer, Sandra Cisneros, she was able to do this stuff. She was able to, create like a coherent short story collection, even though all the things, take place in different times and places, right? So C seems to be like a strong answer to me. D, intuition is a more important aspect of Cicero's writing than the characters or the setting. Not really. I mean, it doesn't say that, characters or setting is more important or less important or the intuition is more important. None of that, right? So I'm not really sure about D. E, the best short story collections feature some through line that the reader can follow and that connects the various stories. I don't think so. They're not really talking about quality here. So they're not saying that, they prefer to have it one way or the other. So they're just talking about the two different ways that can be done, right? So I'm not really sure about E. So the answer is going to be C. C was our strongest answer option in this case, right? So C is obviously going to be the answer that I'm going to go with. All right. Next question. I think this is the last question. So according to the passage, which of the following characterizes both short stories by Isabelle Allende and short stories by Sandra Cisneros? Again, I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to read the question and try to figure out the answer yourself, and then I'll get to the answer. All right, I think that should be enough time for you guys. Hopefully you should be able to come up with a good answer right now. All right, so now let's get to analyzing, right? So according to the passage, which of the following characterizes both short stories by Isabelle Allende and short stories by Sandra Cisneros, right? So similarities in tone among the stories. So does it say anywhere that, so Sandra Cisneros, she seems to have, tone and stuff in all her stories. Does it say that that Isabelle Allende has the tone? Not really. It seems to me that Isabelle Allende just has a setting for the entire collection, right? So she doesn't seem to have the same tone. Doesn't say that has the same tone. Maybe she does, but doesn't say in the passage that she has the same tone. So I don't think so. Next, similarities in time across the same story. Does it say that, Isabelle Allende's story's time and Sandra Cisneros' time, it's like a similar time? I don't think so. It doesn't talk about Isabelle Allende's time at all, right? So not B. C, similarities in characters among the stories. So characters among the stories, okay, so again, we know that for Sandra Cisneros, characters are completely different. For Isabelle Allende, it says the same small town, but doesn't say that, the characters are the same. It says many authors tend to use the same characters, but then doesn't say that Isabelle Allende uses it. So I don't think the characters. Next, similars in setting. So it says that, Isabelle Allende uses the same setting, so that we know. But then what we also know is that Sandra Cisneros has a different setting. So it says much of the burden is placed on the reader because the characters change each time and the setting does as well. So setting doesn't seem to be a right answer here, which leaves us with E, none of the above. So there's pretty much nothing that characterizes both Isabel Alon's and short stories according to the passage. There might be something in real life, but again, according to the passage, it seems to be nothing. So our answer here is going to be E. Okay. So that's it for the session. Thank you guys so much for attending. If you have any more questions about reading comprehension and stuff, feel free to ask them in the chat. I can take questions for a couple more minutes before we close the session. So hopefully you guys understood, how my thought process sort of goes when I solve all these reading comprehension questions, right? So as I look through the answer options, I'm trying to see, okay, like, is there specific information in the passage that supports or rejects this answer? Is there specific information in the passage that even talks about this answer option at all? Is there anything related, right? If there's nothing related, then probably not going to be the right answer. All the strongest answers that we found, they always have direct correlation with what is on the passage, and you can literally point to specific areas in the passage that prove this answer is right. Okay? So that's something that you guys have to keep in mind for all reading comprehension questions. And of course, reading comprehension questions, it's not just about vocabulary, it's also about understanding. So just like I tell all of my students, make sure that you guys are reading articles and try to read at a higher level so that you can understand the language used at these reading comprehension passages. Because if you don't understand these passages, then you're going to struggle in terms of finding the right answer, right? Because again, the answer is in the details, so you have to know how to understand these details. Okay, so that's it. Thank you guys so much for attending. Please let me know if you have any questions in the chat, and I'll be able to help you guys out, right? Otherwise, of course, if you guys don't have any questions, you can always just close the session, right? What I will do is I actually have like a GRE strategy webinar that I'm going to be doing very soon. So if you guys are interested in attending that, I will put the link in the chat below that you guys can check it out. And there we go. So I just put that in the chat, and if you guys want to go check that out, you can. Okay. Johan says, for questions where you have, you need to select 2 answers. How does it work? Will you get points from getting 1 answer right? No, you have to get them all right or you get nothing. So it's like all or nothing kind of style, right? Any more questions? Make sure that you guys are reading articles, guys, because that's the only way that you'll be able to understand the passages when you are when you're reading them, right? Because if you don't have an understanding, then you're probably kind of screwed. Which is why it's very important. Which is why for verbal, I always tell people not to focus on just vocabulary. Vocabulary is just one element of it. You need to build your understanding, and you need to have the right logic in order to be able to find all the answers to these questions. So I think those are all the questions from you guys. Thank you all so much for attending. Says what?
Yeah. So it was an honor to
There's
have
one more
you.
question from Philip.
Yeah.
Philip says, when 2 options seem to be correct, what is the best method to get the right answer? So Philip, that actually happens to me a lot, even now. And what I've honestly found is there's 2 ways this usually goes about, right? So usually what happens is when you end up with 2 options, your intuition will tell you to mark one over the other, right? And there's essentially 2 kinds of people: the kind of people whose intuition is correct, and the other kind of people whose intuition isn't extremely wrong. So for me, generally my intuition is correct. So if I have A, B, C, D, E, and I've eliminated everything except D and E, and I don't know how to choose between D and E, but my intuition, or first time I looked at D, and D seemed to be the right answer to me, and then E, I was just sort of considering it because it also looked like the right answer, I would pick with D. So if you are someone whose intuition tells you it's the right answer, and generally your intuition is correct when you look at the answer option, or like when you actually find the answer for the question, then yeah, I would say stick with your intuition. If you are someone whose intuition is wrong, and generally the answer that you think is right tends to be the wrong answer out of the 2, then go with the other one. So this is like sort of like a counterintuitive way to tackle this whole two answer option thing. But the most intuitive way is obviously to just look through the passage, try to see if you can justify either one of these answer options, or if anywhere in the passage it proves one of these answer options wrong. But that tends to be a little bit more difficult, easier said than done. That's why I go with the intuition explanation, because it just seems to be a lot easier and it works for students. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, I guess we can stay for a few seconds more to see if just any more question pops up. So we have
sure. I think there's just one more. Joanne says, what topic does RC broadly cover, like literature, science, and so on? Are there more such topics? That's a good question. I guess it covers pretty much everything, right? So we do have literature, we have history, we have art and art history, art literature, basically all this art related stuff. Science is also a very big thing. A lot of this research-based projects, so all this kind of research-based articles and everything are covered. What else is there? So history, art, literature. Sometimes I don't know. News is very, very rare. It's usually history, hard literature, but sometimes it can also be very descriptive. So, for example, I read this article that just talked about some river in Brazil and how it's a beautiful river, and there's a bunch of animals and stuff around it, and now it's being hurt by the environment or something like that. So, I wouldn't say that's a very sciencey article. It's more like something that is actually going on. So generally, you won't find a lot of opinion pieces in the GRE. So generally, authors don't have a very strong opinion for stuff. They will just weigh the different opinions that are talked about in a certain topic. So that's what you usually won't find in the GRE. That's why when you guys read articles, you have to try to read different types of articles to sort of get used to every type of literature out there. So generally, if you're a science student, science articles are going to be a little bit easier for you to understand. But obviously, you have to try to expand your reach, broaden your horizon, try to learn everything. Right?
Awesome, awesome, awesome. We're gonna stay for some more seconds if we see if any more question pops up. You have been a wonderful crowd, guys, uh, engaging with the content and asking questions. It feels like we're actually giving value to people's lives and guiding them to these webinars. And
So just ask how many words to approximately do or memorize, I guess. There is no right number of words, right? So it depends on your base vocabulary. So if you are someone with like a really high vocabulary, then you might just need like 400 or 500 words and you'll be good to go. But then if you are someone with very weak vocabulary, then you might need like some 1,500 words or even more to be able to answer all these GRE passages, right? So what I usually recommend students to do is keep learning vocabulary until you can understand approximately 80% of the big vocabulary words that are used in the GRE, right? Once you can understand at least 80%, then you will be able to you'll be able to get a pretty strong verbal score, and you can use logic to sort of figure out the rest, right? Obviously, if you are edging closer to understanding 90% of the words out there, that's even better. When I took my examination, I knew approximately 95% of the words that were used in my exam. So that's really all you need. The rest you can sort of figure out using logic and eliminating answer options and all that. Especially in RC, a lot of the passage information or a lot of the words used in passages, you can sort of just guess using contextual meaning. So for RC, verbal is not the biggest thing. Sorry, RC vocabulary is not the biggest thing. It's more for sentence equivalence and text completion. You're welcome.
yeah, yes. So, guys, if anyone has any more questions, we're ready to take them. This is a wonderful opportunity you have to interact directly with Sachin. Uh,
Okay, I think those are all the questions.
yeah, I guess we're there and we're at the end. So, Mr. Sachin, I'd like to thank you first for being here. And it was an absolute honor and privilege to host you at our Foreign Admins Mentor Conference in this test day of the pre mentor conference. That's because you have been wonderful. Like scoring a full mark in GRE, like 340 out of 340 is just amazing. And it would inspire a lot of people that as like with hard work it is possible, and this webinars we feel like we can bring change to people's lives. I think we have one more question if you'd like to take this up. It is
Sure. Should they ask, can you suggest some resources to build vocabulary? There are a bunch of vocabulary lists out there. Like Manhattan has a list, Magoosh has a list, Barron's has a list. We have a list. Sachinpulil.com, we have a list. Honestly, it doesn't matter which list you choose. I would say pick any two lists. Doesn't matter, right? Focus on how you guys are learning the words, right? So I always recommend using handwritten flashcards because on my YouTube channel I have like a video called "How to Make Handwritten Flashcards." So I always recommend using handwritten flashcards to memorize the words because that's worked for me really well, and I know that it's worked for other people as well. It works for my students, so that's why I recommend that you guys do it. But
so yes, one more
oh,
question we
one
have.
more question. Pranay says, real GRE harder than power prep tests or similar? It's a bit harder because the real GRE will have a test section. So if you are unprepared for the test section, and it's gonna extend the time of the exam, it's gonna extend the difficulty of the examination as well. It's not going to be scored, but again, you are going to feel that it's a little bit more difficult. So that will impact your performance. Right? So it's about the same at power prep, but I would say a little bit more difficult.
And just before we finish the stream, Sachin, if you can please tell the students about what was the schedule like. Like it was a question which comes to us often by a lot of students while they're in session or they're not in session. Like what is like in schedule, especially some people are going for masters after like when they're working. after the experience done. So what
Yeah,
is the
so
schedule like?
I was working as well when I prepared for the GRE, right? So I spent around 1 to 2 hours per day over, I think it took me 3.5 months, I think, to prepare for the examination. So I spent 1 to 2 hours per day on GRE preparation and more time on the weekends, obviously. So I was free on the weekends, so more time on the weekends for 3.5 months, and I was able to write my GRE exam. So that's usually what I tell students to do as well. 3 months is the recommended time, prep time for the GRE. And Shruti, yes, you should take up a second list once you've completed Manhattan, Agush. All right.
Great, great, great. You guys are amazing with all those engagement. So thank you, Sachin, for being here. And it was an absolute privilege to host you at Foreign Admins. And we hope this session was fruitful to a lot of people out there. And I guess we can have more sessions in the future if things work out, and we can help the student community in any way we can, so that they get proper guidance. And so, thank you. It's great to host you, and it's an honor for us. Thank you,
All
Sachin.
right. Thank you so much, Aspat. Take care. Bye bye, guys.
Yeah, yeah. Bye bye.